Power can rot in many ways, but few downfalls are as grotesque as the demise of Charles II of Spain. He was born a king heir to the world's largest empire, yet his body was a battlefield of deformities and his soul a prisoner of fear. His kingdom stretched across oceans, but he could not even command his own failing flesh. His final failure did not come from an invading army or a cunning rival, but from the centuries of poisoned blood that pulsed through his veins. And so, we open not at the beginning, but at the end. The Alcazar Palace in Madrid, November of the year 1700. The once mighty halls are heavy with silence broken only by the murmurs of priests and the choking rattle of a dying man. The king lies twisted in his bed, pale as wax, his hair thin and brittle. His teeth jut grotesquely from a jaw that seems carved by some cruel sculptor. Courtiers whisper that demons have claimed him, that no mortal man could look so disfigured and still bear the name of majesty. Candles flicker in the damp air of his chamber, casting long shadows across tapestries once meant to boast Spain's glory. Now they hang like funeral shrouds. The courtiers dare not meet his eyes. They know that with his death comes the death of a dynasty. The line of Spain's Habsburg kings, a line that ruled empires upon which the sun never set ends, here, with this frail, broken shell of a man. Outside the palace, Europe waits like a pack of wolves circling a wounded stag. Louis XIV of France sharpens his claws. Austria watches hungrily. England whispers of balance and power. The fate of continents rests on the failing breath of one sickly monarch. But within the room, all that can be heard is the hiss of burning wax and the desperate chanting of priests sprinkling holy water on a man they believe bewitched. Stay with me, do not turn away. Because before we can understand this moment, this grotesque spectacle of royal death, we must return to the very beginning. We must walk backward through the centuries of marriages between uncle and niece, cousin and cousin, a dynasty so obsessed with purity that it sealed its own destruction. We must step into the glittering cage of the Spanish court where gold and incense hid the stench of decay. We must follow a boy who was never meant to rule, raised not to live, but to be the last link in a chain forged by human pride. And we must witness how his life became a nightmare that echoed the downfall of an empire. This is not merely the story of a king's death. It is the story of how ambition can defy nature, how empires crumble, not always with swords and cannons, but with silence, sickness, and secrets whispered behind closed doors. Even a king draped in jewels and crowned with gold could not escape the oldest truth of all: blood is no shield against death, and when corrupted, it becomes death itself. Madrid, 1665. The Alcazar Palace is alive with anxious whispers, the gilded ceilings echoing with prayers. In a chamber heavy with incense and candle smoke, Queen Mariana of Austria writhes in agony. She is young, barely 22, but her body has already been offered up to the dynastic altar of the Habsburgs. Around her, physicians, priests, and midwives hover, their faces etched with fear. For in this birth, the future of an empire trembles. The chamber itself is dazzling walls, lined with crimson tapestries, golden crucifixes gleaming in the firelight, saints watching from painted panels. To the unknowing eye, it is a place of triumph where power and divinity embrace. But the Queen's cries pierce through the splendor, shattering the illusion of majesty. The Habsburgs are not like other families. Their marriages are chains forged not of love, but of politics and blood, always blood. And then, after hours of torment, the child arrives. He is pale, fragile, so small that whispers pass through the room. Is he alive? His tiny chest rises barely. The midwife dares not speak the truth of what she sees. The child's head is too large, his features twisted. But he breathes, and in that moment the fate of Spain is sealed. Charles the heir has come into the world. Imagine the contrast. Beyond the palace walls, the Spanish Empire still stretches across oceans. Galleons heavy with silver sail from the Americas. In Naples, Milan and the Low Countries governors answer to Madrid. Priests spread the Catholic faith from Manila to Mexico City. To the world, Spain is the golden giant, the chosen champion of God. But here in this bedchamber, its future lies in the hands of an infant already touched by frailty. Life in the palace is ritualized, suffocating a theatre, where every gesture is prescribed. Charles will grow up surrounded by courtiers who bow and scrape, by priests who interpret every illness as divine judgment. He will never eat without an audience, never walk through a hall without eyes upon him. The Alcazar is not a home. It is a cage woven of gold threads, where comfort disguises imprisonment. The boy's mother, Mariana, sees at once what the courtiers will not say. Aloud, her son is weak. She clings to religion, smothering Charles in relics, scapulars and prayers. Every day begins with Mass, every illness met with exorcisms or holy water. To her, his survival is not medicine's work, but God's mercy. And to the court, Charles is not a boy. At all, he is a vessel carrying the last fragile hope of the Habsburg dynasty. Outside the empire appears strong, but already the cracks are spreading. Gold from the Americas floods into Spain, only to vanish again into the pockets of bankers and creditors. Wars with France bleed the treasury dry. Famine stalks the countryside, though the palace feasts on golden platters. The contrast could not be sharper. A kingdom collapsing beneath its own weight, while within its highest chamber, a prince of clay is dressed in silk and paraded as the symbol of eternity. This is the gilded cage into which Charles II is born. Splendor without strength, ritual without reason, a child without a chance. For the court does not ask whether he can live, whether he can rule, whether he can love. They ask only, is he Habsburg enough? And so the boy's cradle rocks not to lullabies, but to the rustle of parchments, marriage contracts, treaties, alliances, all waiting for the day he will grow into a king. A king who even now carries the seeds of his dynasty's doom within his blood. The curse was not born with Charles, it was forged long before him, hammered into the bloodline of kings by centuries of obsession. To understand his doom, we must step back into the tangled web of the Habsburg dynasty. For generations, the rulers of Spain, Austria, and the Holy Roman Empire clung to one principle above all others: blood must never be diluted. They believed their strength lay not in diversity, but in purity. And so, they married their cousins, their nieces, even their uncles and aunts, weaving their family tree into a knot so tight it strangled itself. Look at their portraits, and the truth stares back. The Habsburg jaw, a grotesque deformity that jutted forward, making speech and chewing painfully difficult. It became their signature, a badge of power worn like a curse. Teeth too large for their mouths, tongues so thick they could barely speak. Faces warped into caricatures of themselves. And behind those faces, the bodies fared no better: frailty, infertility, madness, early death. The numbers are chilling. More than 80% of marriages among Spanish Habsburgs were between close relatives. Cousins became spouses. Uncles married nieces. When Philip IV, Charles's father, wed Mariana of Austria, he was marrying his own niece, and thus Charles inherited not just a crown, but centuries of genetic ruin. He was the distilled essence of a dynasty's arrogance, the living embodiment of pride defying nature. At first, the signs were subtle. As an infant, Charles could not feed properly. Milk dribbled down his chin because his jaw could not close. He did not walk until the age of 8. He did not speak until he was 4. Every milestone was delayed, every attempt to hide his weakness under silks and jewels, doomed to fail. The court whispered. Some claimed he was bewitched at birth. Others whispered darker still that God himself had cursed Spain for its pride, for its wars, for its cruelty in the New World. What else could explain a boy who seemed more corpse than child? Yet, to the world beyond the palace walls, the fiction had to hold. Spain could not afford weakness. And so Charles was paraded before ambassadors, his fragile frame draped in finery, his pale skin powdered, his hair combed like spun gold. Look closely, and you would see the truth, a child unable to chew his food, dependent on servants to carry him coughing blood into his napkins. But look from afar, and the illusion remained. This illusion was necessary, for the empire was already beginning to unravel. France under Louis XIV grew stronger by the day. Spain's armies, once feared across Europe, stumbled in defeat after defeat. The silver galleons arrived less frequently, their holds lighter. Famine stalked Castile. Plague claimed thousands. The empire was rotting, and its heir was no savior. He was another symptom. Here in this fragile boy, the seeds of doom were plain to see. But the Habsburgs could not admit it. They would not. Instead, they tightened their grip on ritual, on blood, on the fiction that God had chosen them eternal rulers of Christendom. And in that denial, they sealed the fate of Spain. For the true tragedy of Charles II was not that he was weak, but that he was made weak by those who should have preserved him. His very existence was a sacrifice, an offering upon the altar of dynastic pride. A boy bound by chains, he could not see his life already mapped by marriages signed centuries before he was born. The cracks had formed. The fortress wall was trembling, and soon the first stone would fall. The fortress wall collapses in 1665. King Philip IV, once hailed as the powerful patron of Velasquez, ruler of vast dominions across Europe and the New World, dies. His body, like his empire, exhausted by years of war and decay. At his funeral, black cloth drapes the churches of Madrid and bells toll for hours. But behind the solemn chants, an unspoken terror coils in every heart. The throne now belongs to a child who can barely walk. Charles is 4 years old. His face is pale. His jaw juts awkwardly, his limbs thin as reeds. His body will not obey him. He stumbles, drools, mutters words that only his mother pretends to understand. Yet the court proclaims him Rey de España. Trumpets sound, banners wave, and priests declare that God has chosen this boy to continue the sacred Habsburg line. The theatre of monarchy must go on even if its star is too frail to stand. But the predators smell blood. France, under the Sun King, Louis XIV, watches hungrily. The Dutch Republic, once humbled by Spanish arms, senses weakness. England, Austria, and the Italian states measure their opportunities. Across Europe, rulers sharpen their knives, waiting for the child king to falter. Inside the palace, power shifts like sand. Queen Mariana of Austria assumes the regency. She is pious, intelligent, but politically inexperienced. And she is a foreigner, an Austrian princess in a Spanish court that resents her. Immediately, factions rise. Some support Mariana. Others rally behind Don Juan José of Austria, the illegitimate but charismatic son of Philip IV. Intrigue fills the air like incense choking and sweet masking the stench of decay. Imagine the child at the center of this storm. Charles sits in his chambers, surrounded by toys he cannot use, lessons he cannot follow. Courtiers bow to him, but their eyes flick toward his mother, toward one another, toward their own ambitions. He is king, yet not master. A pawn dressed in royal robes. As the years pass, Spain falters. Defeat after defeat weakens the empire's grip on Europe. The treasury collapses under debt. Gold from the New World flows straight into the hands of foreign bankers. Farmers starve while the court feasts. To the people, famine and plague seem divine punishment. And whispers grow that the king is cursed El Hechizado. They call him the Bewitched. And the boy, now a young king, hears these whispers. They cling to him like shadows in the halls of the Alcazar. Priests assure him that prayers will deliver strength. Doctors prescribe bizarre tonics and bloodletting. Astrologers read the stars searching for hope. But none can change the truth. Spain is crumbling, and its king is no savior. The trap has been sprung. By placing the crown upon Charles's fragile head, Spain has chained its future to a body too broken to carry it. His enemies abroad prepare to strike. His enemies within sharpen their intrigues. And Charles himself, sickly, frightened, isolated, can do nothing but watch as the empire of his ancestors begins to sink beneath the weight of history. The illusion of safety has shattered. The boy king has been cast into a game he cannot play, surrounded by wolves, both foreign and domestic. From this moment on, there is no turning back. The boy king grows into a man, but his body refuses to follow. By the time Charles reaches his teenage years, the truth can no longer be hidden. Spain's monarch is a prisoner within his own flesh. His head lolls forward beneath the weight of an oversized skull. His jaw protrudes so grotesquely that eating solid food becomes a torment. Servants must cut his meat into paste, his meals softened with broth and wine. He chokes often. His tongue is so large it twists his speech into a garbled mumble, and courtiers pretend to understand while exchanging knowing glances behind their fans. He is a king who cannot walk without stumbling, who cannot produce an heir, who cannot even read the decrees prepared in his name without trembling hands to hold the parchment steady. His body is fragile, ravaged by seizures, fevers, and endless stomach pains. At times he is bedridden for weeks, drifting between nightmares and delirium. And yet every morning the rituals of court continue as if nothing is wrong. He is dressed in silk, crowned with gold, paraded before foreign envoys, like a relic of Spain's past glories. But what of his mind that too bears scars? Isolated from friends, smothered by priests, Charles grows timid and suspicious. He listens to whispers in the corridors, convinced of plots and curses. He dreams of demons gnawing at his flesh. He fears the night and begs for candles to burn through till dawn. In this cage of luxury, loneliness gnaws at him like a rat in the dark. He is married twice. First to Marie Louise of Orléans, the niece of Louis XIV. She is young, vibrant, full of life. But life in Madrid suffocates her. She finds herself tied to a man-child who cannot consummate their union, whose body shrinks from touch, whose melancholy hangs over the palace like a storm cloud. Marie Louise dies young, her spirit broken, her health crushed by despair. Charles marries again, this time to Maria Anna of Neuburg, a German princess chosen for her family's political alliances. She too finds no joy in the marriage bed. She grows distant, embroiled in court intrigues, whispering with her allies, maneuvering for power. Charles remains alone, even in marriage. And so his paranoia deepens. His confessor tells him he is bewitched, poisoned by sorcery. The king believes it. He submits to exorcisms, priests chanting over him, holy water splashed on his fevered skin. Imagine the sight: the most powerful monarch of Christendom writhing on the floor, while friars shout prayers into his ear, hoping to drive out devils that are in truth only the shadow of his own bloodline. Meanwhile, the empire collapses around him. Spain's armies are defeated on the fields of Europe. Provinces slip away. Silver fleets dwindle. Hunger grips Castile. But within the Alcazar, The king retreats further into himself, a ghost haunting his own palace, convinced of witches in every shadow. This is the descent into darkness, not swift, but slow suffocating. A lifetime of frailty and fear. Every failed attempt at love, every betrayal by those closest to him, every humiliating ritual forced upon him deepens the pit into which he sinks. And at the bottom, there is no throne, no empire, only silence, loneliness, and the crushing realization that he is not a ruler at all, but a symbol, a hollow vessel of a dying dynasty. The boy who once stumbled through palace halls is now a man who drags a kingdom down with him. His tragedy is not simply that he suffers, but that in his suffering all Spain suffers with him. The whispers swell until they become shouts, El Hechizado, the bewitched. By the 1690s, it is no longer enough to say that Charles is sick or weak or cursed by nature. The court insists there must be a darker hand at work. For how could the King of Spain, God's chosen heir to Charles V and Philip II, be reduced to such a wreck of a man unless demons were gnawing at him from within? And so the theatre of justice begins, not a trial of law, but of superstition. Charles himself believes it. He trembles before his confessors, begging for salvation. Priests murmur that his illness is sorcery, that witches have stolen his virility, stolen his strength, stolen even his very reason. They tell him he has been cursed since birth, his body an altar of Satan, and Charles, already hollowed by years of sickness and despair, accepts their verdict. He agrees to the rituals, desperate for relief. Picture it, the King of Spain clothed in royal silks, kneeling in a chapel, while friars surround him with candles and relics. They chant exorcisms, their voices rising and falling in waves. Holy water spatters his face. Incense clouds the air until he coughs and chokes. Some accounts claim he foams at the mouth, writhes as if in agony, while the priests bellow psalms to drive out the demons. The courtiers watch with wide eyes, some whispering prayers, others smirking at the spectacle. But no demons depart, no relief comes, only humiliation. Behind these rituals there is no mercy, only politics. Factions at court use Charles's condition as a weapon. His Austrian queen Maria Anna of Neuburg insists the French have bewitched him, poisoning his blood to pave the way for a Bourbon heir. Pro-French courtiers whisper the opposite, that it is the Austrians who curse him, desperate to tie Spain to Vienna. Each prayer, each exorcism, each muttered accusation is another move in the chess game of succession. And Charles the King is not a player. He is the board upon which the pieces move. The absurdity of it is breathtaking. At a time when England and the Dutch Republic are surging forward with science, trade and innovation, the Spanish court binds its hopes to relics and rituals. Doctors capable of offering explanations are dismissed. Instead, a dead saint's bone is placed beneath the king's pillow. Instead of medicine, he drinks water blessed by priests. Instead of reason, he is told to confess, 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 because surely his suffering is a punishment for sins, known or unknown. And Charles obeys, because what else is there for him? He has been robbed of agency since birth. His mother, his wives, his confessors, his ministers, all have spoken louder than he ever could. In these exorcisms, in these accusations of sorcery, he is not even granted dignity. The King of Spain, reduced to a trembling child once again, waiting for someone to tell him what he is. But we, standing centuries later, see it clearly. The so-called justice was nothing but theatre. A cruel charade meant to mask the failure of an empire to blame witches instead of bloodlines, demons instead of dynasties. And so Charles, caught between factions, between superstition and reality, becomes not a man, but a symbol of Spain's decline. A monarch tried and sentenced not by laws, but by the hypocrisy of those who claimed to protect him. The palace grows quiet in the autumn of 1700. The courtiers know what is coming. The priests know. Even Charles himself, frail and trembling beneath his blankets, can feel the weight of the final hour pressing close. His body is crumbling, his flesh exhausted, his breath shallow. Every cough rattles like chains. He is only 38 years old, yet he looks closer to 70. His skin has turned the pale wax of a candle burned too long. This is the last sunrise he will ever see. The first light creeps through the stained glass windows of the Alcazar chapel, throwing red and gold across the cold marble floors. Outside Madrid is hushed, as if the city itself holds its breath. Inside, servants tiptoe through shadowed corridors carrying bowls of broth and trays of confections. For though Charles cannot chew, he still craves the sweet comfort of candied fruits and sugared almonds. Small pleasures in a life that has known so little joy. He eats what he can, sips at warm wine, then falls back against the pillows. Between his thin fingers he clutches relics, bits of saints' bones wrapped in silk, a rosary worn smooth by desperate prayer. He whispers to them like old friends. For years he has been told his suffering is the work of demons. Now he seeks protection, not from armies, not from ministers, but from saints and angels. His queen, Maria Anna of Neuburg, visits the chamber. Their marriage has been cold, devoid of love, but in this final moment her presence carries a trace of tenderness. She sits beside him, dabs his forehead with a cloth, murmurs reassurances. Behind her eyes, she knows what comes after his death. Factional battles, the scramble for succession, Europe poised for war. But before the courtiers and the clergy, she must play her role as the grieving wife. Charles struggles to write his will. His hand trembles so violently that the letters crawl across the page like dying spiders. He dictates instead, his voice a whisper that the scribes strain to hear. His empire must pass intact to one heir, or else Spain will shatter. His choice will ignite a continent. He knows it, fears it, but there is nothing else he can do. He leaves behind no children, no blood to carry the Habsburg name. Only this will his last attempt at control, in a life spent being controlled. The day passes in prayers. Priests file in and out of his chamber, swinging censers heavy with incense, chanting litanies that echo like a dirge. They urge him to confess one final time, to cleanse his soul before God. He confesses until his lips crack, until his voice breaks, until only silence answers. That evening, as the candles are lit and the palace descends into shadow, Charles lies awake. He stares at the ceiling, eyes wide, terrified to close them. He fears that if he sleeps, he will not wake. And he is right. In these last hours, he is more human than ever. Not a king, not a symbol, but a man who longs for comfort, for love, for peace. He is the child who never grew, the monarch who never ruled, the husband who never found warmth. His final sunrise fades into night, and with it, the last fragile light of Spain's Habsburg line. Night closes over Madrid, and with it comes the final cruelty. Charles lies in his bedchamber, the alcove thick with incense, its smoke rising in desperate curls toward the gilded ceiling. His body convulses in waves of torment. He claws at his blankets, gasping for air, while the priests hover, sprinkling holy water as though drowning a man could somehow save him. The courtiers stand rigid, their eyes fixed on the spectacle, pretending reverence, yet already calculating the consequences of his last breath. Witnesses whisper that his skin turned grey in those final hours, stretched thin across brittle bones. His eyes, once dulled by sickness, now bulged grotesquely as seizures racked his body. The air was filled with the sounds of choking, of vomit, hitting the floor, of groans that echoed like an animal's last cry. And yet the rituals went on, prayers, chants, relics pressed to his failing lips. It is not the death of a king. It is the collapse of a body long betrayed by blood and fate. And then silence, a single sigh. On November 1st, 1700, Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg king, dies. 38 years old, childless, broken, remembered more as a curse than a monarch. But his death is not the end of cruelty. It is only the beginning. The body is carried to be examined. An autopsy is performed, and what they discover sends a shiver through the court. The surgeons record their findings with chilling detachment. His heart is described as the size of a peppercorn. His lungs are corroded, rotted with disease. His intestines are filled with blackened fluid. His body swells with water, skin stretched as though drowning from within. His head, when opened, reveals not the mind of a king, but a head full of water fluid where thought should have lived. The rumours spread like wildfire. A king who could not father a child, whose body was a ruin, whose mind was clouded, whose blood was poison. To his subjects, this was no ordinary death. It was a revelation. Proof that their king had indeed been bewitched, cursed, unmade by some infernal pact. But history knows better. It was not sorcery that destroyed Charles. It was pride. It was the arrogance of a dynasty that believed it could defy nature forever, binding itself in cousin to cousin, niece to uncle, until blood itself turned against them. The spectacle of cruelty was not just his deathbed agonies. It was the autopsy that laid bare for all to see the cost of centuries of inbreeding. The mighty Habsburg Empire, stretched across continents, collapsed into the body of one man. And when that body rotted, so too did the dynasty. Imagine the sight: priests murmuring prayers over a corpse that looked more like a husk, surgeons lifting organs shrunken and blackened beyond recognition, courtiers whispering with pale faces in candlelight. They had not just lost a king, they had witnessed the undoing of a royal house. Charles VI's death was not a quiet passing. It was a grotesque theatre of decay, the final act of a tragedy, centuries in the making. And it left Spain not with a monarch, but with a vacuum, an empire without its centre, a crown, with no head to bear it. The Alcazar falls still. The groans, the prayers, the choking cries all gone. Only the faint crackle of candle wicks remains, and even they seem to burn more quietly, as if afraid. A hush spreads through the palace like frost creeping over glass. Courtiers lower their heads, priests cross themselves. Somewhere in the city, the bells begin to toll, but within these walls, there is no triumph, no grandeur, only silence. Charles II, the last of Spain's Habsburg kings, lies motionless. His face is waxen, his body small, beneath the weight of silks and crosses laid upon him. For years he had been a spectacle of suffering. Now in death, he becomes something worse, a mirror reflecting the ruin of a dynasty that believed itself eternal. The courtiers retreat into the shadows. Their whispers begin again, softer, now calculating. Who will succeed? Which banner will rise over Spain? They mourn not the man, for few loved him, but the certainty he once represented. His crown, heavy and empty, has become the most dangerous object in Europe. The Queen weeps, but her tears fall into a void already filled with intrigue. Servants close the chamber doors and extinguish the candles one by one until the king lies in darkness. Outside, the city waits, listening to the endless tolling of bells, knowing their world has changed forever. And then there is the body. Even in death it unsettles. The autopsy's findings seep into rumour, carried by courtiers, servants, priests. His heart was no larger than a peppercorn. His head was filled with water. His body was rotted from within. These whispers become legends, proof to some that he had been bewitched, proof to others that the Habsburgs had angered God. When the coffin is carried through Madrid, the people line the streets silent. No jeers, no cheers, only a strange, heavy quiet. The king who had been both their ruler and their curse passes among them, like a ghost. Some cross themselves, others turn away. Many feel nothing at all. The monarch whose body had been kept alive through prayers and rituals for decades now rests in stillness, and Spain feels for a fleeting moment empty. Yet outside Spain there is no silence. In the palaces of Europe, quills scratch furiously across parchment. Treaties are drafted armies, mobilized alliances sworn. Louis XVIII bores the France. The Sun King smiles in Versailles, his grandson poised to claim the Spanish crown. In Vienna, the Austrian Habsburgs seethe, unwilling to surrender their inheritance. In London, and the Hague ministers mutter of balance and war. But in Madrid, in those first hours after Charles's death, all is eerily quiet. The empire that once thundered across the world, conquering, commanding, demanding, now seems like a hollow shell. Its people wait. Its enemies wait. Even the earth itself seems to pause, listening for what will come next. The silence is more chilling than any cry. For in that silence lies the knowledge that something immense has ended. A line has been extinguished. A crown has no master. And the world is about to bleed because of it. History does not allow silence to linger for long. The moment Charles II's heart ceased to beat, the echoes of his life rippled outward, shaking the thrones of Europe. For he left behind not heirs, not sons or daughters, not even brothers to inherit his empire. He left only a will written with trembling hands, naming Philip of Anjou, grandson of Louis XIV of France, as his successor. It was a choice meant to preserve Spain's unity. Instead, it lit the fuse of war. Within months, Europe was ablaze. The War of the Spanish Succession erupted a conflict that dragged on for over a decade. France and Spain stood on one side, Austria, England, and the Dutch Republic on the other. Battles raged from Flanders to Italy, from the Mediterranean to the Americas. Blood spilled not only for a crown, but for the balance of the world. And yet through the clash of cannons and the march of armies, one truth lingered. All of this had begun with a man too broken to rule. The empire had not fallen with a bang, but with a whisper carried in the laboured breaths of Charles II. The irony was unbearable. For centuries, the Habsburgs had obsessed over their blood, convinced that purity was the key to divine rule. But in their defiance of nature, they had destroyed themselves. The same blood they guarded so jealously became the poison that ended their line. Pride, masked as piety, had strangled them from within. Spain itself would never recover the glory of its golden age. Though Philip V, the Bourbon grandson of Louis XIV, secured the throne, the empire had already begun to shrink. Territories slipped away, fleets dwindled, the once mighty aura of Spanish supremacy evaporated. The dynasty had changed, but the decline was irreversible. And Charles, what of him? History remembers him not for victories or reforms, not for speeches or conquests, but as a symbol. A man whose body bore the weight of centuries, a king whose deformities became the portrait of a dying empire. His nickname lingers even now, El Hechizado, the Bewitched. Yet it was not sorcery that destroyed him. It was the vanity of men who believed blood could defy time, who sacrificed love, health, and humanity at the altar of dynastic obsession. When we gaze upon his story, we see more than the tragedy of one man. We see the warning etched into the bones of history that power, when hoarded and warped, does not endure. That arrogance, when disguised as tradition, can rot empires from within. And that even kings crowned with gold cannot command nature to obey their pride. So I ask you, when we look at our own world today, at nations, dynasties, families that cling too tightly to purity, to legacy, to pride, how long before their blood too begins to betray them? The Alcazar is long gone, reduced to ashes in later centuries. Charles's body lies buried, his bones mingled with those of ancestors who shared the same cursed blood.
but the silence of his death and the war it unleashed still echoes. It whispers to us across the centuries a haunting lesson in the oldest truth of all. No empire, no dynasty, no crown can escape the laws of nature. For pride may build thrones, but decay always waits in the blood.